All right, let's do this. Peanut, if you're staying in the room, no talking. Hello and welcome to the PhotoWork podcast, the talky touchy-feely version of my book, PhotoWork, 40 Photographers on Process and Practice. I'm Sasha Wolf, joined as usual by my friend and producer, the Benedict to my Beatrice. Are you with me?
Yes. Yeah, you know, Shakespearean characters, they have their they have their ups and downs.
Listen, this is an iconic relationship.
That's right.
All right,
I can't wait to tell my wife that I've sworn off love and marriage and
well, you haven't sworn off love and marriage. You've sworn off
a committed bachelor. Yes.
Right. This is another look it up moment for people. By the way, there's another look it up moment, I think, in the conversation from this week, which we'll get to in a second, because how about the fact that I drop in 2 70s disaster movies?
Oh, yes.
I think for everyone who hasn't seen The Poseidon Adventure and or The Towering Inferno, you must. I mean, just do it. In fact, you could do it and then come back and listen to the episode.
Right. And then there were all those airport disaster movies too, I think around the same time, weren't there?
Yeah, wait, what were those?
Weren't there was like Airport 77 and Airport 78
yes. Oh my God, of course. Yes.
We were just so into cataclysmic
those were so bizarre. Movies. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that cracked me up, I say this in the episode, but the thing that cracked me up is like the just sheer number of bizarro cameos in those movies.
Yes.
Like,
oh, yes.
Like all of a sudden Shelley Winters would, I don't know, it was just people probably don't even
Ernest
know who that
Borgnine,
is. Right, Ernest
Shelley
Borgnine.
Winter, right. They'd show up in all these movies.
That was so weird. You were like, wait, what?
Right.
And sometimes they'd like have a few lines and that it was like they just tried to, these must have been like package deals with some studio.
Oh yeah, then they'd go off and do The Love Boat and Fantasy Island.
Right, exactly, yeah. Right. Oh my God. Holy cow. The 70s.
Yes.
Couldn't live with them. Couldn't live without them. Had to live through them. Okay, moving right along. So we have a really wonderful episode today, and I'm going to just some notes here. I talked to this year's winner of the Aperture Portfolio Prize, Donavon Smallwood, and I just want to mention, because we don't say it in the show, that the book of the body of work, Languor, that won the Portfolio Prize, is being published, I think, this August, in a few days, by Trespasser Books, which is Brian Skutmott and Matthew Genetempo's imprint. Their publishing company feels a little much, but anyway, it's their they're publishing the book, so look for that. Also, that on August 5th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Brian and Donavon are going to be in conversation, being hosted by Aperture. And I think that's going to be really fun. I will definitely be tuning into that. So,
is it going to be a remote?
Yeah. Isn't everything still remote, basically?
I guess so, especially now, actually.
I'm going to, tomorrow night so you and I are recording on the 27th of July, and tomorrow night, the 28th, is the closing party for the ICP show. And that's going to be the first event I've been to since the plague.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely feel some trepidation, not because I'm scared of getting sick, but just because I haven't been in a situation, I haven't been in that sort of a social situation in so long. So a little bit of anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
But I will have a quick cocktail and get past it. So, did you enjoy the episode?
I did. Donavon had an interesting entree into photography. It was this connection between archaeology and photography.
Mm-hmm.
I actually studied a little bit of archaeology when I went to the Middle East, and I related to that love of both. But the really interesting thing I thought was the way Donavon had reached out to Brian Skutmott early on in his career. And just the whole idea, you talk a lot about it in your book, is the idea of mentors and, just not being afraid to let someone know how much you appreciate their work.
Yeah, and you never know if you're going to form a long or lifelong relationship with that person. And, knowing that you can reach out to people and they may not holler back, and that's fine. You'll survive. It's not a big deal, but so much to be gained by trying to build those relationships. And for Donavon, it seems like it was, had a real impact.
Right.
That Brian has been in his life. By the way, I did not know this, which is sort of...
I know.
Yeah, I know. It's sort of amazing. I guess I don't know every single thing about my artists. I realize
how
that
is
I
it
was
they
crushed.
keep these things
I
from
know.
you?
God damn it. Man, I lost some innocence.
How dare they have lives that you don't know about?
I'm gonna have to readjust my all the recording devices I've planted in their homes and studios. Yeah, I mean, when he said that after I got over my surprise, it just was so wonderful because, Brian is such a lovely person, really smart and caring. And so what a great ally to have when you're really young and starting out.
Absolutely.
So, all right, well, why don't we get to it? If you don't mind, Michael, please take it away.
My pleasure, and here's your conversation with Donavon Smallwood.
Donavon Smallwood, welcome to the podcast. It's awesome to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm a big fan. I've been listening since I've been in quarantine last year. So it's just like an honor to be here.
Oh, awesome. Well, that's so nice. Well, so much to get to, but let's do what we always do, which is just start out with, the guest's biography. So just dive on in.
So I was born and raised in New York City, specifically in Harlem. I moved to the east side of Harlem, where I live now, when I was maybe 5 years old. And I've gone to public school my whole life, and every school I've attended has been just like walking distance from my apartment. So growing up, I was pretty much isolated to East Harlem, some parts of Brooklyn where family lived. It's funny because a lot of people that I know aren't from New York City, and then they assume I've had like this like movie childhood, And then I have to say no.
You know every part of the 5 boroughs.
Yeah, and it's just like, no, I literally was just in my like 5-block radius until late high school when I started like going places. So I didn't really explore and live like some fantasy kid life. But I started photographing, I think around the time of my middle school prom, but it wasn't really like anything serious because growing up I always wanted to just be an archaeologist or a paleontologist. I have no idea why. I collected fake dig sites, I collected National Geographic magazines, and I was always like, yeah, I'm going to be a paleontologist, I'm going to find dinosaurs, I don't know. And then 1 year in high school, I took a photo class, and I ended up really liking it, and the teacher would lie to me and say that the work was good. He's like, oh my God, this is so great. And he kind of convinced me. He was like, there's like a inherent connection between archaeology and photography, like this metaphoric connection. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And like once he said that, it felt like a teleological eureka moment or something. I was like, oh wow, this is what I want to do. This is it. And I just like changed immediately. And I started searching out like online photo communities and just adding photographers on Facebook and doing all that, trying to get as much information as I can. And I remember maybe 2014, I don't know, maybe earlier than that, there was a short documentary series online called camerabag.tv. and it was just like immensely inspirational. It featured a lot of commercial music, fashion photographers, and it was like short day in a lifestyle videos. And I probably watched all of them like a dozen times. I don't know if it still exists or like the domain is gone, but I added some photographers from that series on Facebook, and I messaged them saying, hey, I would love to meet you and get some advice. And one of them actually met with me downtown. His name is Jimmy Fontaine. And he gave me some advice about school and like, should I go to art school, or how he like pays his rent, how he does all this stuff. And it was just, okay, if he can do this and explain it to me, I can do this. And from there, I didn't go to art school. I went to Hunter College just to study documentary film in English. And, you know, I think, Sasha, you went to SUNY Purchase, right? Is that like...
Yep.
Okay.
I did.
Yeah, I got into there and I was thinking about going, but I was like, you know what? I'm so used to the city. I don't want to even deal with not being here. So I just decided...
45 minutes to Westchester was too much.
Yeah, I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to do this. And it wouldn't have cost a lot of money, but it was like some more money than Hunter. I was like, you know what? I'll save every single penny. And then I will not do it. And yeah, I studied documentary film because I was a big fan, I still am a fan of filmmakers like Chantal Ackerman and Fred Wiseman, and just those like one-off direct cinema verite type films. Just like the kind of stuff that requires like the least amount of creative collaboration between people. So yeah, I would do this for sure. I love this. And I loved reading, so just...
Harlan County, USA.
Yeah.
So good.
I loved reading so much. So I was like, you know what? Studying English makes sense because all I have to do is read and then write about it. That's easy. Okay.
Yeah.
And around this time in school, I was photographing friends and just different ideas, like miniseries, portraits of friends, models, some street photography around campus that just embarrassing to me now, or random freelance jobs. And out of college, I worked for the city a little bit. I was teaching high school students and older, like elderly people, either video production or photography or computer literacy. There's like at recreation centers, there's usually a computer room, and I was basically the counselor of that room for like a year. Mm-hmm. And I did some teacher assisting at ICP and some sporadic photo assisting and digital tech work, which I still do occasionally. And now we're here.
You know, it's interesting to me that you studied filmmaking, documentary filmmaking, but that seems to have fallen by the wayside, which it's not a thing that, you know, I just talked to a lot of photographers who are interested in making films, and you've gone the other way. Do you think you might, you know, get more involved with filmmaking at some point, or do you feel like you discovered it's not for you? Or
it's not so much I discovered it wasn't for me. It was more like I always knew the goal for me was just focusing on photography, and then the documentary in English were just like supplementary. It was kind of like how people say, oh, I'm gonna become an artist, but my parents want me to go and do nursing school. Like that was my type of nursing school. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this, even though there's no job that's gonna come with it, really. So, but I could see myself working in that field of maybe doing some kind of documentary work that's filmmaking, but it's not really a focus right now. It's not something I'm looking toward, you know?
Yeah. Hunter's such a good school, by the way. I mean, I get you would have been great at Purchase. Just have to say that. But because it's the school where you can, like, you know, it just encourages sort of dabbling in, you know, whatever you're interested in. And that's what I did. But of course, Hunter's is such a fantastic school. But it's really funny. I just have to say, I have to comment on what you were saying earlier about growing up here. And because I have the exact same thing where people who move to New York know New York so much better than I do.
Oh, yeah.
Because you move here and you want to learn everything. But when you grow up here, like I never went to I didn't go to the Empire State Building until I was like 30.
Yeah, I literally only went because I remember in elementary school, it was like, okay, you can go to the Empire State Building or you can stay and finish your science pack. I'm like, okay, I'll go to the Empire State Building.
Well, yeah. Okay.
And I got like a really big pencil and I was like, all right, this is cool, I guess.
Yeah. But I love my friends who, like my friend Matthew Pillsbury, who grew up in Paris, but he knows the city better than pretty much anyone I know. And, you know, he'll just be tell me about some place that he biked to for, samosas or tacos or whatever, and I don't even know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, where's that? You and I grew up really close to each other, but I went to school growing up in the West Village, and so the Upper West Side to the West Village was like that was all I knew, and then Riverside Park and Central Park, and you and I have Central Park in common as well, and so that's my segue to your project that won you the Aperture Portfolio Prize. So I obviously really interested in hearing about how winning that prize, what that's done for you thus far, if anything. It's very recent, but tell people about this fantastic project. I mean, it won you the Aperture Portfolio Prize. It's also just sort of been featured a lot of places.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So tell folks about it.
The press has been kind of, I don't really know what the word is, but I just didn't
amazing.
Amazing, but kind of unexpected, really. Like it was just a project that I wanted to get done, and then maybe maybe I'll get like a run of like 100 copies, and I'll try to sell them and pass them to photo editors and stuff, and maybe they'll like it. But then it's been way more than they're like, wow, this is really cool. I didn't really expect it, but the project is called Languor. Aperture is going to be hosting the show, opening the 21st, 5 to 8 p.m. I don't know when it's coming out, but if it's coming out before that, then people can show up. The work itself is kind of like I would describe it as an interaction between landscape and portraiture, and it kind of serves as a examination of what I would consider nature and home and escape and just tranquility. For me, it's both like a love letter and a note of disillusionment all in one, but I guess more emphasis placed on the love of the place, because I don't know, we have to live in the dreams we build, I guess, so I don't want to be too negative with work. But yeah, it's more of a dream I had about a real place rather than a depiction of the place itself. Like, people ask a lot if it's mostly about Central Park, but it really isn't, if that makes sense. It's more about like just daily nothingness and how that can become poetic, and just simple images that don't really exist within the tradition of photography that I've noticed regarding Black people or just being in nature.
What does it mean that the nature therein is nature in the middle of a urban environment? I mean, does that mean anything, or?
Yeah, well, I think it means something, because I feel like when you think of so-called urban environments, or just like thinking about how communities of color don't really have these kind of spaces, these like nature spaces, and that being such a central part of what is Manhattan. Like, Manhattan right in the middle is just this huge park, and it's pretty divided. Like, the most people that live at the bottom part of Manhattan, I would say, are like more wealthy, white, and then the upper part, Harlem, maybe not as much now, is more like people of color, Black people, and it's not like huge swaths of wealth, and they're kind of sharing this space in the middle.
Is it another way in which it feels like a certain kind of segregation in the city? That, I mean, I've noticed that. I've been aware of that my entire life as someone who's spent a ton of time in Central Park. And, that, as you said, the lower part of the park does tend to be whiter. And then the upper part of the park, as you get into Harlem, is blacker.
Yeah.
And, I've certainly noticed that. Now, I live sort of at the top third. And so, and I tend to hang out more in the northern part of the park. But, there is definitely that sort of demarcation, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a question there, but anyway, so how did this project come to be? Like, what's the genesis, now that we sort of talked about what it is? What was the genesis for the project, and what had you been doing before? I mean, I think one thing that people who listen to the podcast, you're a listener of the podcast, you probably can relate to this, is I think when people have a certain amount of success, whatever that means, I always say whatever that means after I use the word success, because obviously it's looks
Varies.
different to different people. Yeah. And, you know, it's to me so subjective, but when people have a certain amount of recognition or get a certain amount of recognition for a project, you know, often the sort of ABCs of that project are really interesting to other people. You know,
Yeah.
how did it come to be? And then how did it get out into the world? Why was it, you know, sort of, why has it gotten the recognition, et cetera? So, you know, how did it unfold?
So maybe the middle of 2019, I had an idea to work on a project in the park and photograph just like the nature that's kind of behind the gates, you know, and try to capture that. And I was gonna name
Any
it.
influences? Sorry.
No, it's fine. Yeah, for the influences kind of changed. So when
No, but that's interesting. Yeah, lay it on us.
so when I first got the idea, which is 2019, the influence, I was like, okay, I was reading a lot of like American literature, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna like read really closely and like find a line of inspiration. And I was reading Moby Dick, and there's a line that goes, "When darkness came on." I don't even remember the rest of the line. And I was like, I love that. Like, I love "When darkness came on," and I'm going to try to work on something around that. And
oh, that's so interesting. Yeah.
and I was in the park, and I was making photographs and doing some stuff, and it just wasn't like clicking. Like, I wasn't coming up with anything that would work for it. And then basically the pandemic happened. So I got to sit and think of like, okay, is there anything that I could do? Like, what can I do right now? And I started taking pictures of fruits in my apartment. I'm like, yeah, this sucks. I hate this. What can I do? And I just started looking at a lot of photo books and reading a lot. And then I think I came across, I think it was a little bit before the pandemic, maybe like a month before. But there's a short documentary that Vox did on Seneca Village. And I watched that and like, wow, this is incredible. Like, I can't believe this is another piece of the park history I don't know about. And I kind of
really amazing.
Yeah, and I kind of put it to the side of my mind, and then I was looking at photo books, and then once it felt a little bit safer to at least be outside, because I know everyone was just not going anywhere, getting food delivered. We weren't going outside at all.
Yeah,
so
we were terrified here in New York of leaving our apartments. Yeah.
Yeah, so when I felt a little bit safer to like start going outside and going places, I would just go to the park literally every single day. And then I was like, okay, maybe there's something I could do like around everything I'm thinking about, around the pandemic, around all these feelings, around the Seneca Village, like everything comes together.
And just let me just interject and say Seneca Village was a village. It was a African-American community that was basically raised to create Central Park.
Yeah, basically.
Right? I think
yeah. That's a good way to put it. And so for inspiration, anyway, I was looking at a lot of John Gossage, Dorothea Lange, Judith Joy Ross, Vanessa Winship.
Oh, so such good influences.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the park and I'm going to just be and try to make something and try to meet people if possible. And that's basically what it all came out of.
Oh, that's fantastic. It's amazing the way, these, I mean, I just think this is so interesting. Could talk about this forever, this sort of the building blocks and how the building blocks come to be and then how they're added to, the structure. So, all these different, little things from that line from Moby Dick that sticks with you. And sounds like it doesn't quite get you there, but it's swirling around in your head.
Yeah.
Then you hear about Seneca Village, and that's going around in your head. You're looking at certain photo books and obviously critiquing that work. And I would assume getting both inspiration and also probably seeing, stuff and thinking, I don't want to do that. I mean, that's one of the great, most important things about looking at work is you don't have, I always say to people, don't just focus on, I love that. It's also really important when you don't like something before you just throw it aside to really, meditate on why you don't like it too, because you learn just as much. But yeah, these building blocks. Then the pandemic happens, which of course is just so bizarre. Still, when I say the pandemic, is like, it sounds like I'm talking about some weird, like, 1970s movie.
Yeah, I wish there was another way to talk. Like, what else could we say?
I know. It's like the Towering Inferno. I don't know if that reference means anything to you, but yeah. So, it's like whenever I say the pandemic, that's what I feel is like one of those, like the Poseidon Adventure, the Towering Inferno. For anyone who doesn't know, in the 70s, there were these like really over-the-top disaster movies being made that had like the most cameos by famous people. Like all of a sudden Fred Astaire would just show up. It was like in the film. It was like so bizarre. But they're sort of great. But anyway, it's so sort of hysterical. And I mean that both, like the films sort of center on hysteria.
Oh,
and
for sure.
And they're hysterical because they're so ridiculous. Anyway, so this all comes together and you wind up doing this series. And what's really interesting, or one of the many really interesting things to me about this series, is that way more of it is sort of built from the ground up than it seems. So a lot of the pictures, or I don't know about a lot, but anyway, a certain amount of the portraits are of people who you met not in the park.
Yeah.
And then placed in the park and staged the pictures. And of course, there's no way of knowing.
Which is which.
Right. The people you just came across and said, can I make your picture, versus those people who you contacted and said, I'd like to meet you in the park and take your picture. But it is really interesting that you chose to do that. I'm super curious. You and I talked for a while the other day, which I always do, or usually do before I do an interview with someone I don't know, just to get to know them a little bit. But I didn't ask you about this, so I wanted to save it, but I'm so curious. So tell us about, why did you do that as opposed, I mean, obviously there were enough subjects in the park.
Yeah.
But there's some level of sort of, it seems to me like you're just determined to add this element of, I don't know, like I'm just going to, I don't know. Just I'm going to add this other element that I don't really need to do, but I'm going to do it. And I don't know. It's just so wacky and unexpected.
Yeah. So earlier we just talked about how, like, for documentary, I love the cinema verite and like direct cinema and anything that not just mockumentary, but like anything where it's you can be involved in what's happening, but if the audience doesn't know, then they just don't know. They just. Like, there's a film I love, and it's called, I think, 17. And it's basically these two filmmakers are filming high school seniors. But if you didn't know how much they were interfering in, like, the discussion, like what the teenagers are talking about and what's going on, you would just think, oh, I guess this is just a wacky high school. Like, wow, this is really interesting. So I love the idea of, whether it be something like this, where it's more like a art documentary blend, where I can find exactly what I'm looking for, and I don't have to look in that specific place. Like, it would be great if everyone that's in the book or in the project was just someone that I just saw just in the park. But I knew, like, seeing people either online or just on the street somewhere else, I'm like, okay, you would be perfect for like this one area, and that's what we're gonna do. That's what I'm gonna make happen.
But as you said earlier, also that this is sort of came out of it's more of a dream. So I would assume for you, on some level, it just made more sense for the sort of psychological integrity of it.
Yeah.
For you to be that sort of involved in the crafting and creation of it.
Yeah, I feel like that's what so much of what art is just, as the artist, you are, I wouldn't say like playing God, but you're like playing creator, and you are making this scene and then bringing it into the world. So that's what I wanted to do, is focus on making this thing instead of waiting for it to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of discussions, right, they've been going on for decades, but we're having them a lot more often now about what that means, really, to the power of the photographer.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you ever think about that, but it obviously can be quite fraught, although it doesn't sound like in this situation that was the case, but less fraught when it's sort of, I guess, a demographic of people that you consider, group you belong to, a location that is your home. You feel like you're getting right, whatever that means. But anyway, that there's inherently a sort of right measure of respect and, well, just representation.
Yeah.
So you do this series, and do you feel good about it? I mean, first of all, do you consider it done? Is it done?
Oh, yeah, it's done.
Okay.
Yeah, the plan was to do it, just work through it every day and be done by not a specific time, but like a time frame. Okay, I'm not going to do any more because I can just keep going. So I know I have to set like a loose date to stop.
Yep. So you finish with it, and then what happens? What do you do? What are you thinking you're going to do with it, or what's the plan?
So the plan is to try to either find a publisher that will be interested in working with me in sequencing it and making it into a small photo book. And yeah, that's about it. Like, that was the main goal of the work, was to be a small photo book that I could show to people or just have and find the people that are in the series and give it to them and just do that.
And this is probably last fall, I assume.
Yes. Right at the end.
So that's the plan. And then do you think I'm going to apply to the Aperture Portfolio Prize, or does someone say to you should apply for this prize? Or?
I think I remember it came up on Instagram or something, and I knew about the prize, of course. I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And I asked some people for feedback on which images do you think I should put in, and everyone gave me a little bit of input, and then.
Wait, who's the everyone? You don't have to name names.
Oh, no, I can name names. So
I'm just like, who are they to you? Who do you...
Oh, okay, yeah. So
who do you go to that makes the most sense in this situation?
So I would go to some friends who aren't photographers and just get what they think of the work. What do you think about this? And then I would go to some people who I really respect, who are photographers, like Brian Skubmott and Matthew Gentempo.
Wait, hold on here. I didn't know you knew those gentlemen.
Oh, yeah. Well, Brian I've known for probably 10 years now.
Did I know that? Did I know that and forget that? Wait. Okay, that's crazy. And for all of those people out there don't know, I'm sure everyone does know at this point why I'm reacting this way. It's because A, he's a good friend of mine, and B, I represent him. So,
I can tell you that it'll be a cool story I can tell you right now about Brian, where I met Brian maybe mid 2012, right? Because that's when he was first online publishing work from Gray's, and I just stumbled across it on, I don't know, Tumblr or something, and I emailed him, said, hey, I'm going to become a photographer. I know I'm going to become a photographer, and this work is immensely inspirational.
I love your confidence. So
yeah.
Fantastic.
I just emailed and said, this is immensely inspirational work, and I love it, and just thank you for making this. This is exactly what I need to see. And he emailed me back, and we started talking. We've kept a friendly relationship since then, and it's been...
Oh, that's great. Yeah, he's such a good guy.
Yeah.
We love you, Brian. Listen, I think it's so valuable what you're saying as far as just... You wanted to talk to Brian, so you reached out. I mean, I think that's so important. What's the worst thing that can happen? The person doesn't respond. Who cares?
A lot of people haven't responded, and I just don't I don't even remember. I don't think about it.
Yeah, and who cares? Who cares? So that's so great. So you've had this relationship with Brian, so you asked him his advice. That's great. And Matthew, who's also brilliant. And so sorry. So continue on. I had to just... take us down that path.
Yeah, and they basically, these are great. Maybe add this one, take this one out. I was like, all right, cool. And I submitted it, and within a few months, I got the news that I won. I was like, wow, I did not expect this at all.
What happens when you win? I should know, since I represent two artists that have won, Brian and Danielle Bowman. But who calls you? Is it the head of, was it Chris Boot at the time? Or
no, you get an email from the base Aperture email, and I think either the first email was from Brendan or Emily Stewart. I can't remember, but went through them and they would tell me like, oh, don't tell anyone.
Right.
And then
haven't announced it yet.
Yeah. And yeah, that's basically how it goes.
And what do you think when you find out that you've won? I mean, are you jumping up and down? Are you losing your mind? Are you chill about it? Or are you thinking, are you shocked? Are you not shocked?
I'm shocked, and I am breaking the rules and telling friends that I know won't tell anyone and family. And yeah, and then I don't know, I just go back to what I was doing. I didn't really celebrate or anything. I just like, okay, I won this thing. It's a really big deal, but I still want to finish some other work and I want to do this. I just didn't want it to go to my head.
Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah. But the work has, just sort of backtracking a bit, has gotten a lot of attention. And so I would assume that it sort of changed your life in some ways. I mean, obviously these things don't come with cash windfalls. So you haven't bought a mansion. But, but, what are the tangible ways, or even intangible, like just how it makes you feel to all of a sudden, start seeing your work published in magazines and a lot of great online pieces, etc.
It just feels like I'm doing something right, like I'm on the right path to what I want to be doing and the work I want to complete, and things are getting done, I think, in a correct manner. Like things are going well. So I'm just like, I get an email for like a new magazine or new newspaper that wants to feature. I'm like, oh, okay, this is amazing. People like this. This is going great. And yeah, that's pretty much how I think about it.
And so I know you're working on at least one new project because you shared it with me, which I really appreciated. It's not on your website yet. I really love it. And I actually think there's some really interesting, it seems like a departure from Languor. I don't know if it's a departure from other work you've done as much, but what can you tell us about the new work that you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah. So the next project I'm working on, which who knows when it'll be done? Like I have no timeline at all, unlike Languor. Like I don't know, but it's called BB, and it's going to be focused on my family history off the coast of North Carolina. And it's going to be, well, let me go into like the history of a bit. So the paternal side of my family has lived in a small town called Washington, North Carolina since the family history began. And everyone's lived there. Like my grandmother still lives there. My cousins still live there. My aunts, uncles still live there. Everyone still lives there. And then I have records and history of like my first known ancestor was in the same place, choir lead, church front, just living in Washington. So the project is going to be just me exploring the land, exploring family, and the ports, which is basically the beginning of the family history in this town.
And how far into the project are you, do you think? Any sense of that?
No sense of it at all. I go back to North Carolina maybe 3 or 4 times a year. So every time I go, I'm working on it. And I'm not working on it making photographs. I'm talking to people and learning more and exploring, walking around, meeting new people. So I would say probably like 10%, if anything. I don't know.
Yeah. There are a lot of really great photographs.
Thank you.
We didn't cover this, and I don't like to get too into it because it's not a gear show, but what camera do you use? How are you shooting, and how are you printing? I do think for your work it's actually pretty important.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, for Languor anyway, there was not a 50-50 split, but a decent split where all the portraits are shot on medium format film, and not all, but I would say maybe 65% of the landscapes are shot on digital. And I don't think...
And why is that?
Because for the landscape images, it was kind of way different how I would work on the two. So for the landscape images, a lot of them are long exposures. Mm-hmm. And I would usually have a really deep or like really high stop ND filter. And I would set the scene, I would set the camera up and hit the shutter and just sit there for 10 plus minutes. And I would want to just look it over. Like, I didn't want to mess up. That was one part where I was like, okay, I want to make sure I got this the way I want it to be. And I think for portraits and film, I didn't want to waste people's time. And I knew if I was working with digital, I would have the tendency to probably waste them a little bit of time. Just like, okay, well, can you turn this way? Or can you look at me over here?
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So for shooting film, I think I'm emotionally a little bit more open. I don't overthink. I just go with what they're giving me. And I get to photograph before my brain gets to analyze and really understand what's going on. It's more like a gut feeling. But for the landscapes, I want to know. Like, I need to know what this is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's definitely unusual. But I think it's important to love the process.
Yeah.
And I think the artists that I know that really put together a process that they really love, I think are the most settled and the most at peace.
Yeah.
Of the artists that I know. Now, I think for a lot of people, they're not going to have that luxury for various reasons. But I do think that for the folks who have figured out the way they work and the things they're interested in, that can work for them.
Yeah.
Where they can be very process oriented. I know that it's, really joyful. So I actually think it's great. This particular combination is pretty interesting, though. So what is the final print?
For a lot of the work, the plan, right now I have been, for most of it at least, if it's the film stuff, it's just been scanned and then just like inkjet print. But I plan to do some darkroom printing. The problem with that is the work has kind of picked up faster than printing has opened. And what I would do is I would go to ICP, and I have teacher assisting hours, which means that I could use their darkroom for free. But the darkroom isn't open yet, I don't think.
Right.
Because of COVID and all that. So I'm waiting for that to open, and then I'm going to work on that a bit and work on the prints. But yeah, the work has picked up faster than I could actually get to it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's probably makes the most sense to keep the body of work, with one set of prints anyway. Just a little bit of...
I'm probably going to make like some special edition silver gelatin prints or something. We'll see.
Yeah. Nice. So what's the different process for BB, for the new body of work? How are you doing that?
So far for this one, just being in the South, really, it's just, I can be a lot slower, and I don't really care to see the images right away and to be so quick with it like I was for this project. So this one has been all film, and it's just been me either driving around or just hanging out with family, and then I'll be like, hey, let's get a portrait here, or I want to photograph this area at this time of day, and I could just set up my tripod and work on it slowly. Nothing's rushed. Nothing is like, I need to see this now. Everything is just shoot the film. When I get back home, process it in darkroom and see what I got.
It feels more personal to me, so it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot in Languor that feels very, deeply personal as well. It's not like they're night and day. There's obviously a ton of overlap between the projects stylistically.
They're separate projects, but they're all part of the one project, which is like the work that I'm making. Even though they're separate, in my head, it's all one thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense, but why don't you say what that is?
I'm not too sure. I just feel like a lot of the work that I'm making now is intrinsically linked, and the content flows together and inform one another. And even though the styles may differ a bit, I feel like they flow one into each other, and what they're saying is related in some way.
They're both very sort of obviously about, I don't know about, but they feature Black Americans at leisure, in nature, in a sort of languorous sort of vibe.
Yeah.
It feels like right now with BB that there's more larger landscape sort of almost establishing
Yeah,
shots.
I think with Languor, it was more an attempt to like create a world through the ruins of the past in a way. Like looking through the lens of Seneca Village, it's more I'm trying to build up something. And this one, I'm just trying to show something. I'm not really trying to build.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I totally get that. One other thing, just going back for a minute, that I wanted to ask about is one thing that I just was really curious about how you feel about this is I noticed that in all these online pieces about Languor that I saw, there's a different, I mean, this is always the case, but I felt it was particularly noticeable.
Yeah.
With your work is that all the different edits, the different pictures that people are using in the pieces. Do you have any say in that, or do you see it when it comes out and think, why did they choose those pictures?
No, I think it's interesting that certain images stand out more for other people, and usually there's like a portrait or two that everyone picks.
Right,
but then there's
totally, without a doubt.
Yeah, but then like some of the more landscape images, there's just they vary in what people pick. I think it's interesting. I give people like the whole package and like just pick what you're interested in. And I think most of the articles or interviews, they pick different ones. And like, wow, okay.
Oh no, all of them did, because
yeah, I think I told you before that I don't read any of them. I'll like scroll through and skim and like look, but I don't want to read it.
Yeah. Oh, they're good. But no, it's just really, it was so noticeable to me. I just was curious, how you felt about it. But yeah, there's definitely overlap with a handful of portraits, but then everyone's sort of in their own space doing their own edit. I mean, that of course is something that artists have to be comfortable with, right? Because whether you're working with a gallerist, an art gallery, or a curator, or a book publisher, you may lose, that control.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I think it's a sort of nice place to stop. It's been really super talking with you, and I know you're going to do great things.
Thank you.
You already are, and I think we've agreed already to hang out soon because we
live close anyway. Come on.
We're so close. It's
yeah, and I did want to tell you that, like I said last year, beginning of pandemic, I was listening to the podcast, and I bought PhotoWork, and I know before I was photographing, I read the whole book, and I like bookmarked the photographers. I liked what they said, and it informed the work. So.
Oh, that's so great. Oh, thank you for telling me that. That's so nice to hear. Yeah, I really, it's obviously incredibly meaningful to me when I know that someone's really using the book. I have some really great folks more people have been in the book coming up on the podcast. And Michael told me to stop saying who's coming up, because then if it doesn't work out for one reason or another, and it's true that it doesn't, because people go off on assignment, and that's usually when things fall through, is someone's schedule just totally changes and whatever. But I do have very exciting people coming up. And,
okay, I'm looking forward to it.
Anyway, well, thank you so much, and everyone get to know Donavon's work, and thank you really for sharing sort of what was in your head, and and I think the really valuable lesson of just having the chutzpah to write to people you don't know, and just throw spaghetti at the wall and
see what happens.
Yeah, see what happens, and just know that no one's getting emails from someone like you and thinking, why is this person writing me? People, we know. I mean, I get this all the time, and you either respond or you don't respond, but it's absolutely the right thing to do. And
yeah, I feel like if someone's work touches you, you should let them know.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Yep, without a doubt. All right, so be well, and I will see you soon for a coffee.
Yes, for sure. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Donavon, take care.
PhotoWork with Sasha Wolf is produced by me, Michael Chauvin-Dalton of Real Photo Show. The executive producer is Sasha Wolf, and our theme music is by J. Walter Hawks. You can hear PhotoWork on all your favorite podcast platforms. Please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify, and be sure to subscribe on any one of those services or wherever you listen to podcasts.